it with now.
I can't find my mute.
Your mute. It's in the middle. There's a white button with a microphone on. There's 2 white buttons and a red button.
Ah.
Yeah, use one of those and that should be able to mute you, yeah? Super. Now then, I should be able to do screen share, which was in that box. There we go, screen share. And we're going to do, there we go, right. So welcome to, these are Astro meetups. We're having them on Skype. They're about various different subjects that people have volunteered to talk to ask me to talk about, and this was one that was voted, and it's about empty houses, which we all have. So we've all got 12 houses in our chart, but there are only 10 planets. So it could be that you've got some empty houses in your chart, but that's cool. It doesn't matter about having an empty house. It's not a thing to panic about, but it is an interesting thing to discover. So tonight's session is to say about the empty houses. We have got some more, it's only me that does this. I've got some more booked. The next one's going to be about synastry. So if you want to learn about how to compare your chart to your loved one, or even to your children, or even to your parents, I'm going to do the next one, which will be next week. I haven't decided on the day yet. I haven't even looked at my calendar, but we'll probably do the next one on synastry. So here we go. Let me start. So empty houses. So make sure you're using the equal house method. And there's more info on why I prefer equal house in episode 131 of my podcast. So to be able to understand about empty houses, we need to remember what each house means. So the first house is the self. Now, if you've made your chart on astro.com, in the center of it, the numbers will be written counterclockwise, anti-clockwise from the 8:45 position, and the numbers will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm just going to go through I'm just condensing the meanings of the houses so that you've got a reference point to be able to check in your own chart where you've got your empty houses. So the first house is the self. The second house is money. Ignore any astrology that tells you about self-worth. It's not. It's only got one meaning. It's money. The third house is communication, siblings, and short journeys. The fourth house is home and roots. The fifth house is creativity and romance. The sixth house is work, health, and service. The seventh house is close personal relationships. The eighth house is sex, birth, reincarnation. So that's like in the tarot deck, that's like the devil card, sort of sex, drugs and rock and roll is the eighth house. Ninth house, long distance travel, philosophy, higher education. The 10th house is career. And the 11th house is friends and groups. And the 12th house is the hidden self. Now, to understand the empty houses, we need to talk about sign rulers. So we've got 12 signs of the zodiac, and each sign of the zodiac has a planet that looks after it, and we call these sign rulers. So the planet that looks after Aries is Mars. The one that looks after Taurus is Venus. The one that looks after Gemini is Mercury. The one that looks after Cancer is the Moon. The one that looks after Leo is the Sun. Mercury looks after Virgo. Mercury's got a double job. Poor Mercury. He's got to look after Virgo and Gemini. Libra is Venus along with Taurus. So the two of them have got Venus as the ruler. Scorpio's ruled by Pluto. And in old astrology, it's Mars. Now, I've written a little note at the bottom there. The old rulers are used in medieval astrology and on the astrology podcast by a guy called Chris Brennan. He uses Hellenistic astrology, Greek astrology, and he will only use those old rulers. So Scorpio, I don't know. I don't know whether or not he does have that as a rulership, but I know that's ancient astrology. And on his podcast, he'll talk a lot about rulers. And I have a lot of my podcast listeners who come to my podcast because they can't make head or tail of what the whole rulership is. So I'm hoping I'm going slow enough for you to be able to understand it today. So Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. Pluto. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and the old ruler, again, this is an old ruler, is Saturn, and Pisces is now ruled by Neptune, but used to be ruled by Jupiter. Now, the reason is the ancient astrologers could only actually see 9 planets. So there they were in Babylonia, looking up at the sky. The night sky was nice and clear. It was a sandy place. It was very flat. They could see the planets, which I can't in Bath because there's a great big building opposite me and I can barely see anything if I look up at the night sky, especially I can never see the moon rising, which is a bit annoying. But they could see those with the naked eye all the way up to Saturn. So that was all they ever used until telescopes were invented. And then the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto, then they were discovered. And Uranus, incidentally, was discovered in Bath. And there's a commemorative, museum to commemorate the chappie that discovered it. And he'd made his own telescope and he was a bit of a nerd. He played instruments during the day and then at night he looked up at the night sky. And it's him that discovered Uranus. The Herschel Museum, William Herschel was the name of the chap. And then a little later on, Neptune was discovered. And that was discovered by mathematics. The guy that found it couldn't see it, but did it because he thought that Uranus had an erratic orbit, so there must be something else in the solar system that was causing it to have such an erratic orbit, and so he did it mathematically. So he's the guy that, I can't, he has a French name, I can't remember it off the top of my head, something like Lavoisier. He was the fella that discovered Neptune, and then Pluto was discovered in America, and that was by a student that was working in the observatory. It's got nothing to do with the Disney character Pluto. Pluto was named after a little girl who suggested the name to her father because she was learning about Greek myths at school, and her dad was reading their copy of the Times, and in that edition of the Times they said they'd discovered a new planet and they wanted some suggestions for the names, and the fellow that was reading the newspaper happened to know somebody working at the observatory in America, and this is back in the day now, so this is when he only had telephones, rang him up and said, oh, my daughter's recommended that it gets called Pluto. So that's the true story of Pluto. So why are we doing this, Mary? Why are we talking about the rulers? So we're going to make a connection between your empty houses and the other planets in your chart to find how else those empty houses might be expressed and what relationship there is between those houses. So it really doesn't matter if a house is empty. There's still a lot going on. So empty house sign rulers. To understand the empty houses in your chart, you need to find which planet is the ruler to the sign of that house. For instance, if Taurus is on the sign of your empty 5th house, then Venus is the ruling planet to that house. Now look and see where Venus is and in which house. Now, I'm talking about sign rulers today. I'm not going to talk about house rulers, otherwise we're really going to get into a bit of a head. I was going to use a rude word. We're just going to get more confused. So we're just talking about sign rulers. Each house will start in a sign, we'll find the ruler to it, and then we'll look to see where the planet that rules it is located, because you will have a planet, trust me. It's not going to not be a planet. So how do you find the house ruler? Look very carefully at your empty houses and keep in mind the degree of the ascendant of your chart. If it's in a late degree, like 26 to 29 degrees, and the ascendant in your chart is at the 1/4 position, on the left hand side of your chart you'll see the initials AC, and it's that is short for, because in astrology everything's shortened, ascendant, and that's the beginning part of your chart. And the way we work through a chart is we start at the ascendant, the houses go around counterclockwise 1 to 12. So the ascendant is the beginning of the first house, and it can be any sign of the zodiac depending on what time of day you were born, and it could be any degree from 0 degrees up to a maximum of 30. Reason for that is the circle contains 360 degrees and there's 12 signs of the zodiac, and each sign can only ever be 30 degrees. So sorry to do the maths, but I need to point this out because there's been so many mistakes because of this, and I see it quite a lot with students as well, and people when they first listen to the podcast, I get emails about it. So if your ascendant is a late degree, like 26, anything between 26 and 29 degrees, it will look as if each house is in a different sign. So I'm going to show you a classic example of this. So this is what not to do. And we're going to use Oprah Winfrey's chart, and her ascendant is 29 degrees and 42 minutes into Sagittarius. So the numbers that are next to the sign of your ascendant lets us know how many degrees it's into that sign and how many minutes. So that's the series of numbers. So I'm gonna just move this down so I can show you her chart, because it's actually in the PowerPoint, but it's more difficult to see. So I'm going to zoom in, and we'll have to zoom in quite a bit. Oh, I better turn my emails off. I think I don't need that. Now then, I think everything else is off. Let's close that again. Thank you. Now then, so this is Oprah's chart. And as you'll see, AC, it says there, 29 degrees and 42 minutes in the sign of Sagittarius. But if you look at the chart, you can go, oh, Mary, her first house is in the sign of Capricorn. A lot of it is, but it starts in the sign of Sagittarius, okay? So I wanted you to see this chart so that you don't get confused because you're using the equal house system, okay? The degree of your ascendant will be the same degree to every other house because we're doing it equally. Now, unfortunately, every other method of teaching you astrology, they're very variable, and the system that's used on astro.com is called a Placidus system. So if you just make your chart randomly up on there without going to the extended chart selection page, you'll end up with a chart with each house as a different flipping sign. Not with equal house, they'll all be exactly the same sign. And whatever sign it starts in, then we go for the ruler. So her ascendant is 29 degrees in Sagittarius, so her first house starts in the sign of Sagittarius, okay? I'll come back to that if I've said it too fast. So in this example, Oprah Winfrey's ascendant is 29 degrees, 42 minutes into Sagittarius. And her third house is empty. There's her third house, okay? And a lot of it is in the sign of Pisces, and it looks like Neptune then is the ruler, but it isn't. So that's her chart, which I just showed you. And there's an extra close-up that I've made there. So there's her third house, but I don't know if it's any more close-up than that. But there's her third house. It starts in the sign of Aquarius, okay? Even though it looks as if, oh, Mary, the whole house is Pisces. It's not. So each house is degrees. So in equal house, each house, as I mentioned just now, starts in exactly the same number of degrees as the ascendant, which makes it so much easier. So each of her houses starts at 29 degrees. So her third house starts in the sign of Aquarius. So the ruler to her empty third house is Uranus. And her natal Uranus is located in her seventh house of relationships. So there's her Uranus. And in fact, I'll just do a quick skip through the planets, what they look like in your chart, because it depends how long you've been learning astrology. So that's the symbol for the sun. That's the symbol for the moon up there. This fella here is Mars. Venus is there. That one there, that's Venus. It's got just one little cross underneath it. Mercury's got a cross, a circle, and little sort of ears at the top. This one up here is Neptune. That one there's Saturn. This is Pluto. Luckily looks like the initial P. Hurrah! Uranus looks like a TV aerial, and Jupiter looks like the number 4. Ignore, while we're discussing this, your chart will have made a thing here called Chiron, and will have also made a thing called the North Node there. Ignore those, they're not planets, they're just astrological. This one's an asteroid, and that one's the thing called the North Node, which I'm not covering today. So her third house is very closely related to her seventh house, and in her seventh house she has Uranus there, the planet of freedom. So how do we work that out? So we just move forwards here, and then everything's decided to go ka-flonk. So the ruler of the third house is located in the seventh, would mean Oprah is a good communicator because the third house is all about communication and needs that good communication in any close personal relationship, which is where her Uranus is in the seventh house. And because it's Uranus, freedom is important in relationships. So I won't go into the meanings of all the planets because we will be here, unfortunately, all night, and we've only got a few more minutes before this PowerPoint's over. But each planet means something as well, and Uranus is the planet of freedom. So she isn't married, but she does have a long-term partner. Okay, so you need to find the ruler, the sign, first of all, of your empty house. Then check to see what is the ruler to it, and then see where is that ruling planet, what house is it located in. And now you've got a big correlation between those two houses. So your empty house has a little dance and a friendship with the house that you've got a planet in. Now we're going to use a client. So this person has very generously volunteered their chart for the podcast, and we've used his chart quite a bit, and he's perfectly happy about that. So here's his chart. There we go. Okay, so we've got somebody with the sun sign, that's 1 degree, by the way, 1 degree into the sign of Capricorn. The chart starts in the sign of Leo, and the moon is in the sign of Scorpio, right next door to Pluto, but we won't cover that just at the minute. So the first house, Leo ascendant, is ruled by the sun. I don't know why I didn't take that out. The sun in Capricorn is located in the 5th house. So the 5th house is all about creativity. So this is a very creative person. The 2nd house is in the sign of Virgo, and the ruler is Mercury. And he has Mercury and Capricorn located in the 6th house of health and service. And he makes money through serving people at the moment. I think last time I spoke to him, he was actually working in a coffee shop, but that wasn't his dream job. So Leo ascendant, ruled by the sun. Sun's there in the sign of Capricorn in the 5th house. The 5th house is all about creativity and romance. If it was a girl's chart, we could say sun in the 5th house, they probably want to have lots of babies. I've got a sister who has a son in the 5th house, and she's had 3 kids, and she was really good at birthing. I was rubbish at it. And then his 2nd house, there's his 2nd house, starts, that's the symbol there for Virgo. And the ruler to that is Mercury, and Mercury's in the 6th house. The 6th house is all to do with the routine of work, whilst the 10th house is to do with career. So this is somebody that needs to make money, because the 2nd house is money. So how am I going to make money, Mary? Oh, then use your Mercury there in the 6th house. Okay, so we're just making correlations between the empty houses, the planets, and the rulers. By the way, I didn't develop this system. Don't blame me for it. Now then, I think I've done that. So the 3rd house, he's got the 3rd house in the sign of Libra. Let me take the chart back up. There we go. 3rd house in the sign of Libra. Libra is ruled by Venus. Venus is in the sign of Aquarius, and it's in the 6th house of and the 6th house is all about work again, but the 3rd house is about siblings. Siblings communication is the 3rd house, and important in everyday work, 6th house. So we've got a correlation here between his 3rd house and again the 6th house, because that's where all his planets are located. So we move on. Where are we going to now? We've got another empty house. The next empty house, because he's got all planets in 3 houses here. He's got a very clustered chart, by the way, he's an indigo. He's got all his planets here in 3 houses and just 1 in opposition. If you're into chart shape, that's a bucket. That's the bowl of the bucket here, and that's the handle of it. Again, don't include that. That's Chiron, and don't include this. This is the North Node, and that's a thing called the MC, but we won't be covering that today. So the 7th house is another empty house here. He's got it in the sign of Aquarius. The ruler of Aquarius, which we just learned, is Uranus. Yay! He's got Uranus and Capricorn in the 5th house. So freedom to have exciting Uranus relationships in the 7th house, and romance is the 5th house. Okay. So the ruler to the 7th is Uranus. He's got his Uranus located there, right next door to his sun sign in the 5th house. The 5th house is all about romance. So if he's going to have a relationship, and he wasn't in one last time I heard, he would probably be more interested in the romantic side of it than the long-term thing, because it's a similar thing to what Oprah has. She has it the other way round. She's got the ruler and her Uranus is in the 7th. But wherever you've got Uranus is where you want to have freedom, or at least to be able to do your own thing. So rinse and repeat. Use this same method to link each empty house with an inhabited house, taking into account which sign the planet is in. And just to remind you that signs modify planets. So somebody whose Venus is in the sign of Scorpio will be different to somebody whose Venus is in the sign of Gemini. So Scorpio is a deep sign, and Gemini is a more sort of chatty sign. So I've given you further reading here. So that's the 3 books that will tell you much more information about it. The links I have to tell you are Amazon associate links. So if you click on the link and you do decide to buy something, then I get a small commission, and I have to tell you that because that's the laws of Amazon. And if you've got any questions, we should go to questions now, but you can get me at my website, maryinch.com. You can learn astrology with me free at that address there, which again will be in the PDF I send you. And episode 62, just as a reminder, if you need to listen to it again, covers rulerships, which we've covered at the beginning here. And we will open up to questions in just a second. And thank you. Have I completely confused you?
That was really interesting, Mary. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so hit me with some questions. I can tell you a bit about your chart if you want to ask, but we have got 15 people. There were 15 people booked. I think 12 have turned up. But if I can answer some questions to clarify it. So you're looking at your empty house, you're finding the ruler to it, and then you're looking to see which house the ruler is in. And so it does mean that even though you have got empty houses, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so give me some questions.
I have 6 empty houses. Is that normal?
Yes, did you see the example that I gave you with this chappie here?
I was too busy writing. I didn't look up very much.
Right, okay, let me, I don't know if I'm still screen sharing. Let me just go back to screen share again, and I'll give you his chart. I think I'm still screen sharing. All right, yes. Oopsie. Let me just, so there's his chart there. And he has, ignoring Chiron now, because Chiron's not a planet, it's an asteroid. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's got 8 empty houses. You've got how many?
6.
Yeah. Have you got all your planets on one side of the circle or spread out a bit?
Most of them are in one side.
So you've got a bold chart?
Yes. Most of them are in Libra and Scorpio.
Yeah, so you're a winter-born baby. What year are you born?
69.
Yeah, so your outer planets, you'll have Neptune into your sun sign and various other things. But yes, it's not rare to have a one-sided chart. I've got one sister with a one-sided chart. What is slightly more rare is if you've got one-sided chart and 2 outer planets very close together. So if you've got Pluto and Virgo conjunct, or if you have Uranus and Neptune conjunct in your one-sided part of your chart, that only happens once every so many 100 years. So with the indigo thing, Uranus Neptune, that's every 170 years. And with Pluto and Uranus conjunct, I think it's every 200 years, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's is it rare? No, because a lot of people that were born in the same year in the same month as you might have that. But what is more rare is that when the indigos started being born in the late 1970s, so many of them not only had all their planets on one side of the circle, but even had their moon there, and the moon changes sign every 2 days. What sign's your moon in?
What sign is my moon in? Virgo.
And what sign's your Pluto and Uranus in? Are they in Virgo as well?
Let's see. Pluto's in Virgo. Uranus in Libra.
Uranus in Libra. Okay, it's a little later on. Yeah, so you've got an outer planet, 2 outer planets that are pretty close together. But yes, I mean, there's all different types of charts in the podcast I cover in the first 3 episodes, are different types of chart shape you can have, and to have all your planets on one side isn't necessarily unique. What it does do is it makes learning astrology fantastically more difficult, because you read all the books like the 8th house means this and the 9th house means that, and you look at your chart and go, but I don't have anything in it. And that's why using the rulership system will allow you to have more info on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Cool.
Can I ask a question, Mary?
Please, Mary. Yeah.
So it's hard. I guess I understand what everything you're saying conceptually, but if you think about, like, for instance, I have my 5th house is empty. Actually, I was going to say it's ruled by Leo, but it's not. It's ruled by Aries. So that would be Mars. And then if I look where Mars is also in Aries.
Well done. You've got a double whammy there. Yeah.
But
You've got, yeah, go on.
Is how, like, because basically you would interpret the planet by the sign that it's in, also the house that it's in, and then pulling in the empty house into that too. I'm having a hard time kind of pulling it all together.
Yes.
And figuring what trumps what.
Yeah. So you need to have your house meanings. Okay. So the first house is the self. The second house is money. The third house is communication. You've got an empty 5th house of creativity and romance. Yeah. But are you creative?
Yes.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter that you haven't got a planet in there. You've got a ruler to it, which is Mars, and your Mars is located in the sign of Aries. In which house?
3rd house.
3rd house, communication. So you would find that it would be more easy for you to communicate about the creations that you make. So whatever it is you do creatively, artistically, whatever, you can communicate. You'll find it much easier. So you're linking up. So it's find the houses and link them. So it's not empty, your 5th. I mean, it is actually empty, but there's a correlation between the two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think I was trying to figure out how to interpret the planets, but I guess it's a separate way of analyzing, right? It's just analyzing the empty house is different than,
Absolutely, yeah. But you can also take the planet into account. Obviously, Mars is the planet of action, aggression, and energy, and wherever you've got it in your chart is where you get energized. I've got my Mars in the sign of Aquarius in the 6th house, so I love my flipping job. Like the intellectual communicating side of it. I love talking to people, so that's what that is. But in your case, because you've got Mars and your Mars is located in your 3rd house, you're going to be a very strong communicator because Mars is a strong planet. And yes, you pointed out Mars is in its own ruler. You get an extra tick for that. So if you had Sun in Leo in the 5th house, okay, just if you did, that's not only the ruler of it, but the 5th house is a house ruler. But I'm not covering house rulers today, otherwise we'll be here for the next 64 weeks. But each house has a ruler as well, and that's another way of looking at it. And again, anything in astrology, there's more than one way of doing it. I'm just demonstrating for you one way to understand empty houses. The other thing to completely keep in mind, that even though you have an empty house, all the time a planet is going to transit it, and every month the moon's going to go past your empty houses. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you're born with an empty house, there will be at some point a planet transiting it. And it could be that you've got an empty 2nd house and it's in the sign of Capricorn, and Pluto, Saturn and Jupiter have been transiting through there for the last 2 or 3 years, and Pluto for the last, 6 or 7 years. So your 2nd house of money is now being vitalized and energized by the transiting planet. Yeah. So an empty house can be brought to life by a transit or looking at rulerships. Does that help?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Of course you can. Who am I talking to?
Oh, it's Rita. Sorry, my video's not on because my bandwidth, I tend to lose signal when I put my video on. So I have an empty 8th house.
Yes.
Which is ruled by I've got Pisces on the cusp.
Yes.
So I've got a pretty equal house system. Pisces on the cusp, and my Neptune is in the 5th house conjunct Venus, which is so my 5th house is quite packed.
Yeah.
But my 8th house is completely empty.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
I'll tell you what it is, but just to let you know, I'll answer that. I think they are, to let you know how many there are. They're the combinations that you can have between houses and rulers is there's some enormous flipping number. I think it, because you've got to think you've got
My
10
third house is
planets, 10
empty.
planets, 12 houses, and 12 signs. The combinations that you can have is a lot, but I'll talk you through it. 8th house is empty. It's in the sign of Pisces. At the moment, there's two things going on. Neptune's transiting through your 8th house. So your 8th house, sex, birth, reincarnation is being activated by the transit. But just looking at the rulership, you've got your ruler of your 8th house in your 5th house. So Neptune is the ruling planet, which is a bit fuzzy and psychic and all the rest of it. You've got that in your 5th house of creativity. So let's hope that you're doing something psychically / creative in some way, with Venus located in your 5th house is there. But now you've got a correlation between your empty 8th house, which is sex, birth, reincarnation, and the other side. That's also the house of mediumship. Not the 12th house. People make that as a mistake. The 8th house is the house about sex, death, birth, the other side. If you've got something in your 8th house, which you don't have, but you've got a ruler to it, the 8th house is possibly the ability to do mediumship. Have you ever done mediumship? What are your psychic abilities like?
So I do work as a platform medium. I don't have planets in my 8th house, but I do have 2 in my 12th house. Which is my moon and Saturn, but they're not conjunct. So I do, and I'm going through.
Then, So because this is the thing,
that's interesting.
You can say I've got this job, and it's mediumship, and I've got nothing in my 8th house. What's Mary talking about? But what's the ruler to your 8th house? It's Neptune. You've got it in the 5th house, which is creativity. Let me know if I'm talking too fast. But the 5th, and you got it to Venus as well. So you absolutely love the creativity of what you do. Yeah. And there's the psychic ability, because that's what Neptune's all about.
That makes perfect sense. And I also have an empty 1st, 2nd, and no, I've got Pluto in the 3rd. My 1st and 2nd are empty.
What's your ascendant?
It's 0 degrees Leo.
Okay, what's the ruler to Leo?
The Sun, which is in my 6th house.
Yeah.
Which is of service. So I'm very much. So I lead in my day job, which is not the psychic stuff, but I don't have any planets in my 10th house. I think I've got Chiron in my 10th.
Okay.
Depends.
Yeah, look at the ruler to that. So just don't give up with it. The Sun's in the 5th, which is the house of service. So, part of the mediumship is service anyway. But this is the chart that I was showing you earlier about the young lad and his very clustered chart. He's working in a coffee shop, but he's not doing that as his career. He's got other stuff going on because he's got Sun in the 5th. He's doing something creative as well. He's not making any money doing it at the minute, but he's getting it out there type of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I hope that helps. If you need more detail, do get the books, because there's so many different combos that you can have. The one by it's 2 ladies that wrote this, Marion March and Joan McEvers. I don't think they're alive anymore, and it's called The Only Way to Learn Astrology. This is volume 3, and I think there's 6 in the series. You can get it secondhand, but in there she has absolutely every combo. So she'll go ruler of the blah 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 in the la 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 house. The other books do it as well, but these 2 ladies, who were both Aquarians incidentally and almost astrological twins, have done them in much greater detail. And I think they were highfalutin Teuton astrologers and they're hanging around with presidents and stuff, so they use quite a lot of those in their books. I'm not that famous, I can't do that.
Brilliant.
You're welcome. Anybody else with questions?
I've got a quick question, if that's okay.
Go, Leah. Yeah.
So I was listening to what you were saying earlier when you were using like Oprah. Was it Oprah's chart in the start? When you said about her ascendant being a late degree and kind of kind of makes the chart look like signs are in other houses, and I've got that with my chart. Like I'm looking at it now, I've got quite a lot of planets in my 6th house, but it makes it look like loads of them are in the 7th. So when it comes to kind of identifying empty houses, it's a bit like confusing because everything's kind of shifted kind of a house, if that makes sense. So I think
you need to look at the numbers then. You need to, what degree is your ascendant and in what sign?
It's 26 degrees in Leo rising.
Okay, right. So as I said earlier, if there's anything from 26 degrees to 29 degrees, your chart's going to look a bit weird, like Oprah's is. Yeah. So then you need to check the degrees. So if you make sure you're using astro.com, because generally speaking, astro.com will stick your planets in the house, but sometimes the computer program can't physically do it. Like if you've got, and a lot of indigos have this, a whole wodge of planets in one house. When you look at the picture, it looks as if they're not in there. So then you need to check the maths. So you go down bottom left to where all the data is for your chart, and it will say, so what sign's your sun? Sun sign?
Aquarius.
Okay. And your sun sign is in which house?
My 6th house.
Okay, so that's about work and service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a lot in there.
Yeah, and then that's where you've got all your planets, and then you need to go where you've got your empty houses, see what the connection is. So then that adds a bit of flavour to those empty houses. So they're not empty, there's an energy exchange between the empty house and the full houses. But when you've got those late degrees, you'll have to look at the maths of each planet and the numbers, and also the maths of the house starting in the various sign. I mean, I actually have it in my chart because my ascendant is a late degree of Leo as well, and I think it took me something like 14 years for me to work out what the cusp of a house was and what the rulers were. And I kept reading these books, it was going, and I go whoosh over my head, and I didn't understand it. And then eventually one day it was like, oh my God, and I finally got it. That's because I got a different program, that computer program, and I could actually see the flipping things. But yeah, it is
Can be quite confusing. Yeah, because I've got my moon in Gemini in my 10th house, but then every time I've like looked at it on a chart, it shows it like in my 11th, and I've always been really confused. I've been like, why is it doing that? Like, because my midheaven, my 10th house is Taurus, so I've always been really confused how it's, the Gemini's like 0 degrees, so I've always been really confused how it's like literally on the cusp of the sign. I think it's just kind of getting your head around that, if that makes sense.
okay. Yeah, and are you using equal house every time you do it, or did you occasionally use Placidus?
I think I've used Placidus a few times. Like when I first started, to be fair, I wasn't using like the best kind of website. I was using like Astro Cafe, which isn't very reliable. I think it was just where it showed the tables. I was trying to kind of understand it that way with the information rather than like looking at a chart this way. But I think because it's not always had the right information, where it said like my Libra Mars has been in my 3rd, and I thought it was for ages, and then realised it's actually in my 2nd. I think it is better doing it kind of the way that you've said.
Yeah, equal house makes it easier. Placidus is a daft system. It was some bloke called somebody or other, and he named it after Mr. Placidus, who was a monk, and they whatever. And the stupid thing about the Placidus system is that you can't make a chart if you live in Greenland. Planets will be missing. So, okay, I've done a whole podcast on it. Don't get me started on equal house and why I use it. But it is much easier to understand chart rulers, because then you go, oh, okay, so if my ascendant is 26 degrees into Leo, then my 2nd house is going to be 26 degrees into Virgo, and my 3rd house is going to be 26 degrees into Libra, and so on. Yeah. Okay. But you can have a house start in one sign and a planet in it that is a different sign. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you will end up with a mixed thing, but it doesn't matter about that as far as this goes. When we're talking about the ruler, it is, as said earlier, it's the ruler of the beginning of the start of the house.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I'll just have to try and kind of get my head around it, kind of come back and have a proper look. But thank you.
Yeah, you'll get the PDF afterwards, so you can go through it again. Yeah. It is quite, as I say, it took me such a long time to learn this one. It was just like, yeah. But I got there in the end.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions? So has anybody got planets all the way around the circle? Anybody got a splash chart with hardly any empty houses? So I know quite a few of you got clustered charts, but anybody got a splash chart with the planets all the way around? So you've got planets in like every other house, or most of them. Or have you all got cluster charts? Oh my goodness, everybody's got cluster charts. Anybody got splashes, planets all the way around? Nope, you're all clusters. Oh, get you. Well done. Okay. You can still have empty houses. There's just the maths of it. There's 12 houses and 10 planets. So there is going to be at least 2 empty houses. So that's the minimum amount of emptiness that you can have. But there could be a maximum as well. The most cluster chart I ever saw, and I think it's on my website when I was talking about the indigos, was somebody who had everything in 2 houses. I don't know how they managed it, but they had 10 empty houses. They live in Ireland, in Dublin. She's perfectly normal. She's got everything in 2 houses. Like, how'd you manage that? So you're looking, so it's chart rulers, and then also take into account where the planets are transiting. So for instance, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, where the planets are today, there's I think there's not planets in every sign of the zodiac, but tonight we've got planets. Let me move that out of the way. Move. We've got planets in Taurus, Aries, Pisces, Capricorn. That's decided to die. Let me come back. Look at my phone. Right, today we have planets in, what's the date today? 12. Right, today we've got planets in Taurus, Aries, Pisces. I'm going all the way around. So if we start down there, so we've got planets in Libra, Scorpio, nothing in Sagittarius, Capricorn, nothing in Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. So that's transiting planets. And obviously, every month for 2 days, the moon is going to be in some house in your chart. Yeah. So if you've got a very, very empty chart and you've got all those empty houses, pay attention to where the moon is, because for 2 days of the month, it's going to be in the empty bits of your chart. And obviously when it's your birthday, the sun's going to be there. And then when you've had your birthday, the sun will be transiting through those empty houses. So that's something to keep in mind. There's always going to be something going on. It's not as if your chart is totally inactive because it's empty. And if anybody here is an Aquarius, there's 2 major planets just going to be transiting into your sign. So Jupiter and Saturn are just about to next month go into the sign of Aquarius. Jupiter be there for a year. And we also have to think about how long each planet stays in a sign. So the sun spends a month, the moon spends a couple of days, Mercury's a month and a bit, Venus is slightly over a month, Mars can be a bit longer. Like we've got a really long Mars transit at the moment. Lasted something dark for like 3 months. It spent ages being retrograde. That's just started to go direct. But that's in the sign. So is it Mary? You were saying you've got your Mars in the sign of Aries? Yeah. So you've got Mars in Aries right to the end of the year. So your chart's pretty active. That's your 5th house, isn't it? Yeah, so communication should be pretty good at you at the minute. Right, yeah. You've got when Mars is, because Mars was retrograding, now it's going direct, but Mars has been in the sign of Aries for a long, long time, which is a rare thing, doesn't happen all the time. I think the last time it happened was quite a few years ago. So pay attention if you've got an empty load of houses, which planets are actually working their way through it. And the way the planets work, if you've just done your natal chart, the planets will go around counterclockwise, and you can go back to astro.com and find out where the transits are. And I might do a transit webinar at one point and explain how that works. But as the planets transit, they go around counterclockwise. So when you look at your chart, you need to imagine in your mind everything's going to go around on the outs. When you do a transit chart, they come in the outside of your chart in green, that they're going to be going around counterclockwise on the outside of the chart. I mean, I can demonstrate it with a computer program, and I have got on YouTube some live making the planets move videos. So you can, it's one on my YouTube channel, it's about the moon changing signs. So you can actually see that it's a dynamic thing. The natal chart is static, it stays the same. It's like your fingerprints, it never alters. But the transiting planets, that's what I spend most of my time doing, talking to people about transits. How long is this going to last? Well, actually, it's Pluto, it's going to last a long time. Or it's the sun, it'll be fine next month, you know. So we need to think about how long does a planet stay in the sign, and the ones that stay in the sign the longest is the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Saturn is the middle planet, only spends 2 years in each sign, and Jupiter's only a year. So everything will shift, but your natal chart stays the same. Anybody, any more questions? You can ask about other things as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be about this.
Mary, can I ask about my ruling planet of my communication of the third house?
Okay, so what's
it's
yeah.
Sagittarius it starts in, my third house that's empty.
Yes, which is ruled by
Jupiter?
Correct, well done.
Is that right?
That's right, you got it, well done, yeah.
I didn't all look that up whilst I was on mute. And then, so my Jupiter is in the 12th house.
Whoa, okay, get you.
So what's going on there then? So I'm like hiding what I mean? What's because it's in my hidden, because I've got empty house and then it's in the hidden house.
Absolutely. Okay, so what sign is your Jupiter in the 12th house?
Libra. Everything's
okay.
Libra.
Right. So Jupiter in your start, what was the first house you had empty? I didn't write it down.
Third house in Sagittarius.
Third house, right.
In Sagittarius.
So your third house is an empty house, yes? Totally empty, nothing in it. Third house is then in the sign of Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. If you've got an empty third house, which Mary incidentally didn't have, is it where you've got your planets, is it? Or is your third house empty? Where you've got your planets, right, okay. I think, oh no, I've got a planet in my third house. So if it's empty, it's a planet of communication. And I know you do teaching, so we can't say you're a shit teacher, because you're not. You're a brilliant teacher, yeah? And you've got Jupiter is the ruling planet to it. Well, Jupiter's about knowledge and learning and philosophy. That's what that planet is all about, is the ruler to your third. So you'd find knowledge easy. But your deep beliefs, because Jupiter's the planet of belief, you're not going to share with us because it's hidden in your 12th, unless I poke you a bit. So you're not going to tell me about how you're anti-vaccine or whatever, joking now. But, whatever you've got in your 12th, you're not going to want to share too much with others on a public platform type of idea, yes?
Okay, right, I see.
But you've got it in the sign of Libra, which is about close relationships. So you have a lot of belief in relationships, but what we've got in the 12th is where we need to ponder. The 12th house, and the best book on it is by a lady called Tracy Marks. She's written all about the 12th house. The 12th house is wonderful. In fact, I really ought to do but not in the 12th house. I love the 12th house. I've got planets there. But the 12th house is what we hide from other people. So your Jupiter in the sign of Libra. So you don't want to reveal your beliefs about relationships to everybody all and sundry, yeah?
Okay.
But because you've got a relationship between your 12th and your third, so this is about what am I hiding and what can I communicate? So maybe I could help other people communicate things. Do you not do, what sort of work do you do? What type of teaching is it?
Well, I used to be a primary school teacher, but now I teach English to children and refugees who don't speak English.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So there it is. Okay.
Yeah. You got it. Yeah.
That's what I do. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's what I do, but that's why.
Yeah, that is what you do. And that's the crazy thing. When you start looking at rulerships and you go a little bit more deeper into your chart, you'll find that you're actually doing all the things that your chart says will be a good thing for you to do. It's just like, oh, how did that happen? That's astrology. That's when astrology comes. That's when I love it. You go, oh yes.
And now because my Jupiter's there and I don't like sharing what I know, I'm now uncomfortable that you now know that.
Exactly, yeah. We'll delete you out of the video afterwards, okay?
Mute that, edit that.
Mute that. Okay.
Thank you.
So we've got 4 more minutes left. Anybody got any questions? Anybody else want to share? Yes.
So if you've got an empty 11th house, obviously that doesn't mean like, oh, you don't have any friends.
Yeah, I've got an empty 11th house as well. Yeah. What signs it start in your 11th house? Did you say Gemini?
Yeah.
Okay, which is ruled by?
Mercury.
Yeah. Where's your Mercury? What house?
In my 6th house.
6th house work. Okay.
Yeah.
So you like to make your friends at work?
Okay.
Yeah. So you would be somebody that would be very good co-worker friendship type of thing. Yeah. So you would find it very easy to make friends at work. Now I must differentiate between the 6th and the 10th. The 10th house is the career. That's where we go with our work. But the 6th house is what we do every day. So the 6th house is turn up to work, turn the computer on, turn the coffee machine, lay the table, whatever it is we do with our job. But the 10th house is the careers. So that's the 6th house is sort of like the job description, and the 10th house is the where we go with it, so how we get promoted and stuff. But the 6th house is also to do with health. Yeah. So the other meaning of the 6th house is health. So if you've got a lot of planets in the 6th, then you do need to check your health, not go bonkers with it.
Yeah, I found that because I found when I've looked into the 6th house, like, it does talk about health, and a lot of kind of different people have said, "Oh, you're probably really into like health regimes, like the gym," and like I'm definitely not. But I think maybe even mindfulness and that kind of health can play into it as well.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the gym. The 6th house isn't the gym. Depends what you classify as health. Health's a very big subject.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you've got a connection between your 11th house of friends and your 6th house of work. So where you get, you might find that a lot of the friends that you have are via the work that you do. And I definitely have had that. My friendship circle over the years has grown from the work that I do, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my 6th house, because I've got so many planets now, I think it does feed into a lot of kind of the empty houses as well, because they all kind of link there.
Yeah, everything will link there because where your planets are located.
Yeah.
But if you, I'll send you. Does anybody want a copy, or is anybody here not got a copy of Donna Cunningham's book about stelliums? Does anybody want a copy of that?
I've got that already.
You've got it.
Is it quite good? Would you recommend that?
Yes, who asked? Somebody asked me. Do I recommend it?
Yeah, it's Rita. I'd quite like one on stelliums.
Yes. Okay, Rita. So if you just say your name and I'll email it to you afterwards. So Rita, I'll send it to you. Mary, you want it as well, yeah? Okay.
Could I have one as well? It's Maria.
Maria certainly can. Let me tick you on the list, Maria.
Can I have one as well?
Brigitte?
Brigitte, yeah, send it to
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Who else? Anybody else?
Could I please have one? It's Abby.
Abby, of course you can, darling, yes.
Thank you.
And Leah, you definitely want it, yeah?
You've already sent it to me before, but thank you.
Right, okay, you got it, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Me too, please.
Amanda, yes. Amanda.
Thank you.
Yeah, because in her book, she talks about stelliums. Stelliums are when you've got a whole cluster of planets together, and like, how do you interpret that? Which is a nightmare to do if you're just reading the bog standard things on websites, because you go, well, how can that mean exactly the same thing as the other thing? But she explains about how to assimilate it all, because that's what happens when you've got a cluster chart. Would anybody else like a copy?
Yes, please,
Please,
Mary.
could I have one?
Yeah, so that's Juliet, and then somebody else just asked me.
Izzy.
Izzy, darling, yes. So I've got Mary, Brigitte, Abby, Izzy, Rita, Amanda, Juliet, and Maria. Anybody else need a copy of
Yes,
Donna's?
add the other Amanda too.
And the other Amanda too, yeah. And just to keep in mind that the book I'm sharing with you is a PDF. And Donna wrote it just before she died, and she had a big thing about her stuff being shared online and her not making any money from it. She died, didn't have any children, so there's nobody that will inherit her royalties. And I just don't think it's fair that some bloody great big company can. So I'll share it with you, but just on the understanding not to share it online. Keep it yourself, maybe share it to your friends, but don't go uploading it to some website and sharing it with loads of people, because I'm sure you'll understand. But yes, I should definitely share that with you. So I hope you've enjoyed this evening. If you need to get in contact with me, it's mary@maryenglish.co.uk. I will stop the video in just a second and we can chat. But I'd like to thank you for turning up this evening and learning about empty houses with this Skype meetup. So thank you very much. I'll see you soon.